Hey, fellow tennis nerds, I hope all is well. Today I have a treat for you. I have Tim Puttock from Prince. He's the Director of Research and Development. So we're going to get into new Phantoms, which I've been a huge fan of, and some other developments coming from Prince. So first of all, how are you today, Tim? I was going to say Prince.
I'm doing well, thanks, Jonas. Good to be back on the podcast, and yeah, looking forward to talking about the world of Prince and what we're working on, and obviously the Phantoms, which you've hit now, and I'm glad to hear you like them, and we can dive into some of the details on that and talk a little bit more.
Yeah, so if we start with the Phantoms, which is quite interesting. So I remember it was 2020, I think the previous editions came out. They were well liked by the people I talked to, and obviously the people in the tennis nerd universe. A lot of people love the 100X 305 gram. But when you are setting out to improve upon an already liked frame, how does that look from your point of view when you're at the drawing board? What are you going to improve? How are you going to work to create a new generation?
Yeah, and obviously this is the third iteration now of the Phantom. So the first generation was really well liked. It was a little on the softer side. It had a little bit more of a muted feel, and we realized that we wanted to adjust that and give it a little bit more power, a little bit more pop for the modern game, which is where we ended up with the second generation. So we'd stiffened up, certain areas of the frame. We adjusted the layup to get that a little bit more crispness. And even with the Twaron added in that second generation, which does dampen a little bit of the vibration in the frame, we obviously had adjusted that for a little bit more power. And I think when we look back at it, we maybe gone a little too far. And some of that feeling, some of that, the magic of the first round of the Phantom, because it's obviously a unique kind of frame in tennis, being so thin and having such a sort of buttery feel. We'd gone a little bit too far, so we wanted to dial that back a little bit and get a little bit more back to that sort of flexible DNA of the thin frame Prince rackets. So that was really our intention with this racket. We've added the Xylon material now instead of the Twaron, and we've just found that gives it a little bit more responsiveness, a little bit better feedback, as opposed to some of the mutedness that we got with the Twaron material. So that was really the intention. And then it's fine details. It's play testing the frames. It's listening to feedback from players and really trying to gauge where we need to make those minor adjustments in terms of layup, tweaking stiffnesses in certain zones, or changing a little bit the balance or the way the frame is set out. So it's really, once you've got a frame like the Phantom that is unique, it's really trying to dial it in to make sure it still has its the guts of what that frame stands for, but tweak it a little bit so that it's still suited for the modern players.
Yeah, that's kind of the way I could see it. You're moving from generation to generation, and you've seen it with other brands and other types of racket models, is that you might take it one step too far, then you dial it back a bit, you add something. It's you have to keep iterating. You're not going to maybe reach perfection at the first generation of a frame, right?
Sure. I mean, I don't know that there is ever perfection, and I don't know that there's ever the perfect racket for any player, and it's why all the brands have different models in their selection, so that you have rackets that suit different players' games. So we're never going to find, I probably can't build the perfect racket for Jonas. Obviously, I could talk to you and, we could discuss what you like and what you don't like, and I could make tweaks, but there's always ways to improve things, and there's always ways to use materials in a different way, or constructions in a different way to get slightly different features and benefits from the frame. And that's obviously what we want to do as a brand. We don't want to just sit and say, well, we've got a racket that is great, we're just going to update the cosmetic. We always want to try and push it forward and make sure that the racket is best suited to the most players we can.
And one thing you mentioned there, cosmetic, this one is kind of a gutsy step towards more like a military green. I guess you can call it camo, but I see it more kind of military style, and I like the looks of it, but it's at least going a little bit further than you did with more the silvery second generation. How was the thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, the Phantom obviously lends itself to darker colors. So the original generation was that black with the popper green, and then we went to the blue and the purple on the next generation, and this time we've gone to a green. We're looking at cosmetics 3 years out from when the racket comes to market. So sometimes there's trends there that, you know, we're obviously working for a brand that is part of a family of other brands. We see a lot of colors in fashions and things that, you know, we're seeing those where they're coming in, which years they're coming in. So it's interesting for us to look at those and be like, well, this shade of color is going to be good in 2024. I think the reality is that we wanted to keep it dark, but just offer something different to the consumer. I think we've been through a phase where we've had a cosmetic that's been sort of consistent. So we did the inner hoop blocking, and we kept just updating that type of cosmetic. So we did the black with the inner hoop color. We did that for 2 generations, and we're like, you know, it's maybe time that we take a different stance, sort of, I think, to some of the other brands. And we wanted to offer something that was a little bit more fashion forward, a little bit more seasonal in terms of our coloring. So the next generation of the Phantom probably won't stick with that green color. It'll be, you know, whatever our design team is looking at in terms of aesthetic for 2026, 2027. But the green, you know, green has always been a color synonymous with Prince. And, you know, we sort of wanted to put our flag in the sand a little bit and say, you know, we can do any shade of green. We don't need to be the bright green. We can be a forest green, or we can be a teal, or we can be something nice. And it was a shade of green that we felt was going to really be strong for this year. It's dark. It does have that, you know, we've seen people commenting that it's a camo finish, and, you know, we've been asked, is there going to be a camo bag to go with it and things like that. We're not calling it camo. You know, it's that, you know, darker, it's a military green color, but it still fits in line with that darker sort of tones for the Phantom.
And you have a bunch of models. I guess they're different, and I'm keen to hear your thoughts about that, like different geographical ideas behind, like when you launch a racket, you have, okay, Tennis Warehouse Europe, they don't get this one, or they get that one, and Tennis Warehouse get this one. Just mentioning that retailer. But how do you think about the different models when you create, like, okay, how many models we're gonna have? Are you gonna have the 93P, which was a favorite, but it's kind of like 93 is a little bit old now, or 97, 100, 107, so on? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, and, you know, the 93 was old when we brought it in the first time. You know, people weren't really playing with 93s anymore. But I think it was important that we introduced that, and we catered to players that enjoy that. And personally, I love playing with the 93P. If you like that sort of compact hitting feel, you know, a bit more mass behind the ball, there really aren't that many rackets out there that are like that. So I think that's always going to be important. We haven't come out with that with this initial launch of the Phantoms. As you said, you know, we're catering to, you know, a lot of different territories with a lot of different needs. And what we've done in the past is we created this sort of menu of rackets, you know, and we had 12 Phantoms in the range totally, and they weren't all sold in every territory. And that then meant that you had different rackets in different regions, and people would complain, oh, I can get the 93P in the US, but I can't find it in Europe, or I can't find it in South America, or, you know, this country has this and I can't get it here. So we've sort of cleaned that down a little bit for now. We've done a tighter offering on the Phantoms, and there's just 5 that we're introducing to launch. We do have other Phantoms in the pipeline, so it's not that those rackets won't exist. We're just going to pick a time where we can tell those stories and really focus on some of those more niche stories, more niche offerings that just deserve a bit of love to themselves. So we will bring those in a little bit later on, and those will be offered to all of the countries, but it won't be a case where everybody takes a 93, because I don't know that every territory wants a heavier racket. And there's some parts of the world, you know, partners that we work with where they don't carry 03 anymore. That hasn't been successful in their territory, but we still firmly believe in O3 technology and the benefits that it brings to the player. So it's still something that we consider on all of our lines and will offer to certain parts of the world.
Yeah, makes sense. When you look at the Phantom line, and the ones that I've tried now are the 100X, 290, 305, and there's the 1820, which is 320 gram, and at the 107, which is kind of like harkens back a little bit to the old graphite, the legend. And the 100P, which is that box thin beam. What would be the player demographic, like who would like a Phantom line? Obviously, there are easier rackets to use, and there are heavier rackets with denser patterns in the lineup, but what would be a Phantom player in your head?
Yeah, I mean, as I said to you before, we can never make the perfect racket for every player, and we try to build a range of rackets that suit different types of players. We have both the Phantom and the Tour, which are both they're both sort of control-oriented rackets in the modern game, but they're quite distinct from each other. The Phantom obviously has that flexier feel. It has a softer impact than the Tour. It's that more rounded head shape that you can still get pretty aggressive with, spin angles and trying to really accelerate the racket through the ball. And, it has that nice mass to it that makes it's different to anything else that's out there, and I think that's important to us. So, I mean, really it is for a high level player, just the stiffness and the weight of the frame automatically lends itself to somebody that has good strokes, that isn't going to get late on the ball. But it's suited to really any advanced player that's looking for a control frame and that likes that sort of softer feeling.
Which Phantom is your favorite in the lineup?
That's a good question, because I obviously hit all of our rackets, and I hit I've hit a lot of test versions of things as well, so I know sort of the background. I would say probably my favorite personally, because it's suited to my play style, is the 1820. I hit quite a flat ball. I don't hit with a ton of spin, so having the 1820 just helps with that sort of flatter trajectory to control my shots. If I was if I hit a bit more spin and I was controlling the depth of the flight through spin, I'd probably be looking for something a little bit more open. But for me, the 1820 just suits my game. I have a lot of fun hitting with the 107. It's such a unique player frame now in 2024. There really aren't many oversized player frames out there. I'm not expecting us to see tour players back on tour with the oversized rackets as we did in the past. The game of tennis has moved on, but it's still it's a really fun counterpunches frame, and to play from the back, it's so much fun to hit.
Yeah, I agree. It was a fun experience actually, and really nice feel and pocketing from the string bend. And I do feel like Wilson, they have this 104, which when you look at the head size, for example, of the 107, 104, these type of racket, you think, oh, it's just for kind of beginner-ish players. But I know several like ex-ATP guys or like really strong players that play with this type of frame. And I think there's definitely something you should reconsider if you're not already doing that. Like the head size sometimes can give you a feeling, oh, it's a beginner racket. No, it's not really. Like you can control the ball with this type of racket.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not a beginner racket. I mean, you look at the number of players that played with the original graphite when it was there. None of them were beginner players, So, we definitely don't consider it as a beginner's racket. It obviously has benefits with the slightly larger sweet spot, the bigger hitting area to really connect with more players, but it's still a very serious player's racket. And again, it is something that's, there's Wilson with a 104, but it's still that oversized racket is quite unique in the market. And I don't see any reason why players shouldn't go to that. And I think there has been a sort of culture of, well, I shouldn't play with a 107 because that means that I need more help. I need to play with a 100. And everybody's sort of gravitated to the same weight specs and the same head size, and you know, it's nice to have something different out there that you can hit with and still, you know, get a player's type of frame, but that gives you a different benefit. So we're always going to try and do things like that and offer something that's maybe a little bit more unique. That's really what Prince is all about. That's what it's been about from the beginning, is to, you know, make tennis more fun for players and make tennis a little easier for players. And if we're not offering those types of rackets, then we're not doing our job properly, I think. Or if we're not exploring new technologies and new ways to improve products so that people can enjoy tennis, then, you know, we're not the brand that we set out to be. So I think we'll always try and do that.
I think that's important because like there's been a kind of I would say everything is the same. Like, I mean, like we have the Starbucks culture where like the homogenization of society, like you have the same shops everywhere, you have the same thing. And the rackets obviously follow that. Like everybody has a 100 screens racket with a thick beam, 60-19 pattern. And then you have a 98 one, which is more controlled. And that's it. And it's nice to have something. Oh, here's an ultra thin beam. Here's a box beam. Here's a 107 head size. Even like a 93 had its purpose, like, because it's not always about like winning tournaments. And most tennis nerds or players that love tennis, so they're not competitive players. They're not going to compete for any titles or anything. They play tennis because it's fun. And then it's about like having a nice sensation, getting something out of the frame, and it maybe having a little bit of identity reflected in the racket, right? So I think it's great that you keep pursuing different types of rackets.
Yeah, and you know, and we will continue to do that, and we're always exploring it. You know, in the research and development phase, and obviously we've come out in recent years with some frames that are a little bit out there, and some have worked and some haven't worked commercially. But I think we still stand by the fact that they've offered a different type of playability. You know, we'll look at the Synergy, which had an 18x18 string pattern, and then we did the Vortex, which had a 14x21 string pattern. And they had very different types of playing characteristic. Neither of them was particularly, commercially successful for us. But we had those groups of players that came to us and were like, I need to get more of this racket. This racket is perfect for my game. So, you always get those players that will test rackets and will try rackets. And obviously, I'm talking to tennis nerds. So you have a following of players that are going out and testing product and trying different things, and I salute that, and I think that's great. But we see it doesn't always equate to commercial success. We know that the 100 square inch 16-9 string pattern will be commercially accepted, and a lot of that is not from players that are testing everything that's out there, and they're not they're just saying, well, this athlete's using this, or this is the one that's in the store that's recommended, so I'm gonna play it, or my coach is recommending it to me because that coach is endorsed by that brand. And it's funny because the thing with Andy Murray that happened recently, where he's been endorsed by a certain brand for his whole career, and then he went out and just tested rackets as a pro athlete. It's sort of unheard of, but it's really refreshing for a guy to just go out there and just string up a load of rackets and see what's out there and see what's good, because I think people don't do that enough. And I think, all the athletes that you see, I know you see racket changes, and obviously you guys talk about that, but a lot of players are using the same racket that they've been using all through their career, and technology has changed and products have changed, and there are definitely rackets out there that people maybe don't know as much about because it's not available in every store. It's not something that they see that people down their tennis club using, and maybe there's some benefits there that brands like ourselves, we're trying to find features and benefits for different types of players, because everybody doesn't play the same. My game is different to your game, is different to the guy down the tennis club, and so if we're all using the same racket, it's maybe one player's getting the advantage from that racket because it's a good racket, but the right racket for somebody else could be something totally different. So I think it's important to have different types of products and look at the game in a different way. And like I said, it's always nice to hear somebody reach out and say, this racket is perfect for me, even if it hasn't been, something that's been hugely successful.
No, there's obviously also among retail players and the pros, as you mentioned, like there's a fear of trying something new, and like when you have a guy that's on verge of retirement, we have Andy here, and he goes out to just buy a bunch of different rackets, get like a 3-in-1 machine or 4-in-1 or whatever he got, like and putting lead tape himself. It just shows that this is something that everyone can do. Like you said, like it's like you try 5 different brands, see, oh, this one is interesting. And if you're a pro player, then you have a little bit more information about what works for a game, what doesn't work for a game. And it may give you at least confidence in what you're already using, that you're feeling, okay, I make the right decision because I tried a lot of other things and it don't work. But sometimes you might need to change it up, and you don't because you're afraid of like losing part of your game, and stuff like that.
Yeah, of course. And, there's definitely a comfort you find in consistency. So, if you've used the same racket for a long time, then you keep using it because you get that feedback. Whatever you change to, it's going to feel different. So, even if you're feeling, oh, okay, I've got a bit more power, or I'm getting a bit more spin, sometimes you still go back to the old one because, well, this just feels right. I know what's going to happen every time. But, you look at players like Roger, who, he went to a bigger head size, same brand, same DNA of his racket, but he changed it up to try and find something better. And, it probably extended his career, and he still had a lot of success doing that. So there's always, there's always product out there that we're trying to make as brands, and not just Prince, obviously all of the other brands too. They're trying to create rackets that suit players. And it's just in our particular case, we're a little smaller, we can be a little more agile, we can try some different things that are maybe not right in the middle of what's commercially acceptable. But I do think there's a real opportunity for players to go out and try some of those different types of products, and maybe they'll have a bit more fun playing tennis. Just use the same thing their entire tennis career, and something different can be good.
Yeah, 100%. And for me, especially, like I always like thin beams and kind of 80-20 patterns, but then you need more forgiveness. You're playing a little bit higher level. I play a lot of tennis these days. And then like a racket like the Phantom 100X, now 18-20, I'm in between 18-20 and 16-18, can't make up my mind. But I do like the 18-20 probably a bit more because I'm a bit like you. Like I prefer that kind of control. You feel confident to go through the ball a bit more. Otherwise, you start holding it back a little bit. It's just how your game develops. But otherwise, I would have to go for something more like a 98 or a 95, to get that thin beam, because there's not that much options, So you need to have these opportunities. The same as like comfort rackets. Like a lot of rackets today are very stiff and they rely heavily on a lot of dampening, so you don't have that feeling then if you get the comfort from the dampening tech. And it's nice that you then have like, okay, you have thinner beam, softer RA, you have a lot of different options on the market. And you have one that's like other lines that we can talk about. Like I was a big fan of the Ripstick, the Ripstick 100, the 300 gram one. I like the 280 as well, has more room for customization, obviously. But is that something you're working on an update on as well? Like the Ripstick line, was that a commercial success in any way, or for you guys at Prince?
Yeah, I mean, the Ripstick was sort of, it launched at the same time as we did the Synergy and the Vortex, and it was, we were really looking at that sort of tweener space and how we can offer different benefits to those players. So, the Synergy was very much a counter-puncher's, a more flat hitter's frame. The Vortex was very much a spin frame, to try and generate more motion on the ball. And the Ripstick was sort of our power option in that space. It was, how can we make a 100 square inch racket that can really generate a lot of easy power and be really fun to hit and easy for pretty much everybody to use. And obviously we've got that really aggressive CTS construction. We've got really aggressive O-port design on that frame that makes the sweet spot huge. It's super easy to play with. So that was really the one of those three that was the most commercially acceptable for us, because people could pick it up and it was just easy to use from day one. We are working on updates to that line. So for 2025, the spring, we're going to have what we're calling now the Rip franchise, which is going to have updated ripsticks, but also updated ripcord frames. So I don't know if you had a chance to hit with the ripcord as well. It's more of a traditional construction version of the Rip. So same geometries, but it doesn't have the O ports. And we've completely refreshed that ripcord frame. So brand new layups, brand new cosmetic, to really tie closer together with the ripstick. And they're sort of like a yin and yang of that power type of frame. So the ripstick has the O3. It's a huge sweet spot. It's easy to generate the power. Whereas the ripcord is also a power frame, but it's a lower swing weight. So you're generating power through racket head speed, but it has a more traditional feel. And those are going to sit side by side and come out at the same time as part of this bigger Rip franchise, which we're really excited about. And, you know, it's more of a natural successor to, you know, the Beast and the Warrior and the Speedball Black and the O3 White. That legacy of rackets that we've had in the Twino franchise is now going to be where the Rip is going to sit for 2025. So we're really excited about it. You know, we've done a lot of play testing and spoken to a lot of people about those frames. We're excited about how they look. It's going to be something new again for 2025. So people can expect to see us doing some different types of cosmetics and things. But yeah, we're excited about that for 2025.
Yeah, how important is the cosmetic? We talked about the Phantom before, but I really love, like, it felt like an 80s vibe on the Ripstick, the 300 one, where it's like a little bit all over the place, but it kind of worked, you know? It's just like, it's like an aggressive look that works really well with the aggressive O ports, right? And the O ports, I always like them because, like, they create a feeling of comfort and a very nice sensation when you strike the ball, you know? So I thought that was like a really cool racket. Like, it looks so different when you bring it around the tennis courts.
Yeah, and we got a lot of positive feedback on that cosmetic. We also got negative feedback on it too. You know, there's going to be people that like it and people that don't, and we understand that. Obviously, as you said, it was a pretty aggressive cosmetic, and it's an aggressive frame. So you can expect the next generation to also be an aggressive cosmetic. You know, bright and bold, and speaking to a customer that wants something aggressive. So yeah, I think the cosmetic is important. Yeah, we think about it from franchise to franchise. And like I said, we're not sticking to a sort of paint by numbers strategy with our cosmetics anymore. It's every franchise has a unique look and feel, because we're targeting different types of players. You know, we have the legacy rackets that feel very luxurious with that sort of, you know, shades of gold and things, which is really nice, but we're catering to a different type of player there. Whereas the Phantoms always have that darker, more serious feel. However we execute it, they're going to have that feel. And then the Rip franchise is going to be aggressive. So that's sort of where we're going with it. But it's going to have a different look and feel to the last generation, because we want to offer, you know, our consumers something different. You know, we don't want to just do a minor update on the cosmetic and the racket look exactly the same. And what's the incentive? The racket's going to play differently because we work on it, but to a lot of consumers, they're going to just think it's the same as the previous generation. So we want to be able to offer something aesthetically that is appealing to people as well, and gets them excited just looking at the frame. So the cosmetic's important to us, and I know our design team puts a lot of time and effort and thought into how the franchises are going to look. You know, we're already looking at how those franchises change in 26 and 27, 28. That's already being thought about. But yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see what people think about the Ripstick and Ripcord next year, or when they first get, you know, when they first see it, because I'm sure we'll have some teasers later in the year. But I think it's definitely aggressive.
As a racket engineer who has a long time in the industry, what makes you excited these days when you're working on like a new line or a new racket? Or like, do you have, obviously everyone has off days and on days and stuff like that, but what makes you like, okay, this is exciting? Because you've been doing this for a while now, and you've done a lot of rackets, you know a lot about rackets, and what makes you still want to, you know, go out, play test new prototypes and keep doing this?
Yeah, so I'm almost 20 years now with Prince, so it can get we're updating the rackets, and it can get a little the same. My true passion is in really trying to move things forward, and Prince is, I think it's why Prince is an ideal brand for me to be a part of, because it's always been about developing new technologies and creating new solutions to make the racket, and that's what I'm looking forward to right now. So we're looking and doing research projects behind the scenes on what's the next technology going to look like, what are the performance benefits we're trying to aim for, what are the goals we want from our future technologies. And that's the part that really gets me motivated to keep doing it and keep trying to push to create the best rackets. So I love doing the development side, and I love doing evolutions of products and trying to fine tune those to get the best rackets. But when we really dive into a big research project that is maybe going to be a shift in the way our rackets play and where they go, those types of projects are the ones that really get me excited. So, and I've been involved with quite a few of those in the last 20 years. I've worked on O3 and Speedport and all the tech stream frames that we did. And I'm excited about what's going to come after. And it's stuff in the pipeline. I'm not going to get too into that right now. I think maybe that's next year's podcast. But yeah, we have stuff that we're working on behind the scenes. It's early days, but that we're pretty excited about, early stages of those. So that's what's keeping me ticking.
And it's quite a long process, I guess. Like if you were drawing something up, you have an idea for a type of frame or a new line or a new racket in the line, and then you need like prototyping and stuff like that. And like how long is that process? Like you need some good patience there, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I don't need patience for it because it's exciting to work on those. And, when you're really involved in it and you're really on it, that time sort of goes really quick. We're often working on stuff that's in 26 or 27, and we're talking about the Phantoms that came out now. And to me, by the time they launch, they feel old. Yeah. So it's like I've tested every version of it coming through, and I've seen different versions of the cosmetic. And by the time they launch, it's like, well, okay, but what's next? Because I've seen this already for a long time. I mean, it depends on how big of a technology change it is, and really what you're working on. If it's an iteration of an existing technology, or it's it's tweaks in layup and specs and things, they don't take as long. Obviously, we do a lot of rounds of playtesting and make sure that the product is where we want it to be. The bigger projects, the real big research projects, there's sometimes you have to go back to the drawing board, once you're a year into it, and you can come across something in production or in material that will take it in a different direction. So those can be pretty open-ended sometimes. But yeah, it's definitely this one is definitely going to be a little while till it's introduced, and we've been working on it for a little while already. So I'm pretty confident with where we're going to be. Obviously, it's something that's not going to be in the next year or two, but it's so I guess it's at least a three-year project, I guess.
Since you are in a kind of unique position, the way your company is structured, the way you work, also with your many years of experience, and also the way Prince approaches it, like you as a racket engineer and you as a brand trying to do something a little bit different, trying to push the envelope a little bit. How much do you look at the competitors? Like, I mean, obviously you need to do competitive analysis, but like, are you excited by anything the competitors are doing? Are you now kind of seeing patterns and like, okay, this is cosmetic update, this is just one layup tweak? I mean, since you have so much experience,
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to dive too much into what the competitors are doing. I think what I'd say is, we're here in 24, and there really isn't any bad product out there anymore. it used to be, you'd get some rackets or some iterations of rackets, and they'd not really be great. I think everybody's making really, really solid frames right now, and they're a lot of fun to hit. I think there's some brands that are doing a little more to push the needle. I think everybody's seeing a lot of Yonex rackets out there right now, which is great, and there's Technofiber rackets out there, which is great, and I love that people are picking up those different brands and trying different things out, which is still that's encouraging to me working for Prince, because I'm hoping that means people are trying our rackets as well and enjoying what we do. But yeah, I mean, I like a lot of the rackets that are out there right now. A lot of them are fun to hit with. I just think that we have to, as a brand, being a little smaller than we used to be, and it's definitely a very different structure to when I started working with Prince. We have to be a little bit more nimble and try some different things. And again, as I said, some things won't always be commercially successful, but it doesn't mean that they're failures. We learn from them. We use things from old rackets and put them into new rackets in a different way, and we're always trying to use that to drive us forward. So I'm sure we'll have a period where we're finding some great commercial success, and it's going to be down to us driving the brand forward and hopefully driving tennis forward and the type of products that people use. I don't know if that's necessarily the mindset of every other brand out there. Those brands that have got a lot of players using their rackets right now, it's maybe a little bit more difficult for them to try some different things and explore different things, because when it's not broke, you don't try and fix it. So I'm not saying we're trying to fix things. It's just the DNA of Prince to try and move the needle. And so, like I said, I'm really happy to be on this brand and on this side of sort of change. So, yeah.
And I think many tennis nerds appreciate it, because like for me as well, testing all the rackets, honestly, I'm not terribly always excited about having a minor tweak or maybe just even a cosmetic update or a combo of both. So it's always like so exciting to test, and it's sometimes tough then to detect and explain more, or like what is different, right? People ask, like, if I have this V8 or V9, which one should I get? I can get this half off, blah 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 blah. And I'm always trying to be on the consumer side, like, okay, it doesn't make any sense to pay double money for the similar playability, although it's a tad different, which I might feel who have tested rackets for many years, but to the regular consumer, it maybe makes no difference, and the $100 they save is more important, So I like that you're thinking differently, it's like this Apple slogan, right? Think different. One thing I wanted to ask about is the lines, right? So you have the Tour, you have the Phantom. Beast no more, or is it staying in some jurisdictions, kind of depending on
market? So we do have Beast still in certain markets. We still have the Beast is still very successful in Japan. It's also still available in Europe, and we have updated versions of that. I think for us, for most global markets, our focus is on what is our four major performance franchises now, which is the Phantom, the Tour, what will be the Rip as a combined franchise, and then the Legacy, which is our oversized, comfortable frame. So those are our major platforms, but there are still other rackets that we have out there, because we want to still be able to do things like the Vortexes and Synergies and Twist Powers and things of the world. We want to be able to do those. Some countries, those are more accepted than others, which is great. People play on different surfaces, people play different styles of game. There's still going to be a place to do classic frames, or bring back old frames as well, and just give the customer an opportunity to have some nostalgia and play with something that they remember from the past. So I think that's important. But our focus in terms of where we're going to try and drive the brand is going to be with those four major platforms.
Yeah, it's a good clarification. Yeah, and I also like that you leave that open a little bit for maybe legends of or like reintroducing some classic frames, because I know like the audience, the tennis nerds, many of them like classic frames, many of them like heavy frames. Maybe they shouldn't use heavy frames, but they like them anyway. So it's like there's that old school demographic that like, okay, you know, rackets just gone down the toilet, which I don't agree with, but there's a lot of people who think that from the mainstream brands, and they love when there's some like old school traditional player frames being offered. And I think like you need to cater to them as well, because that's the way they have fun, and they kind of get nostalgia. And that's about tennis is all about having fun in the end. Like it's having fun and getting exercise, right? That's it, right?
Absolutely. And it's funny that you mentioned that players maybe shouldn't play with the heavy frames. You know, we pulled out some of our rackets from our archive, and, you know, there's rackets in there that are 360, 370 grams static weight. And, you know, you go and swing with them, and you have to swing differently, because obviously otherwise you're catching the ball late. But, you know, you get that racket planted in the zone, it's actually super easy to play with a heavy racket. It does a lot of the work for you. So, you know, sometimes if you've got a different kind of swing, that type of racket is actually suited to players. And obviously we can't come out with a racket that's 370 grams and sell a ton of them. But, you know, people spec their rackets up and customize things to weights, which you'd probably say isn't, you know, really feasible, but sometimes it's fun to hit those too. We will do some nostalgic frames, and we will try and cater to those players that like that. You know, and sometimes we'll try and recreate things in a 2024 version, you know, like the Phantom 107G, for example. Yeah, it's a Phantom racket. It's not the original graphite. It's not intending to be, you know, a like for like. This is what we're painting it. We're painting an original graphite in the Phantom cosmetic. It's its own frame, but obviously it shares a lot of DNA in it, and it pulls on a lot of the things that were important to us with the original graphite. And, you know, later this year we're going to introduce, and this is maybe exclusive to you here, the 03 Phantom 100, which will come later this year. And, you know, we've done the 03 Phantom 100 in the past, and it maybe didn't resonate with people. You know, we thought that, okay, we had so much success with the original 03 Tour 100. It was such a popular frame with players and with customers alike that, you know, the 03 Phantom 100 would naturally be similar, because, you know, it's the thin frame, the 03, and it didn't really resonate the same way. It was all too soft, too muted, and it didn't quite have some of that magic that the 03 Tour 100 had. So we've gone back to the drawing board with the 03 Phantom 100, and in a similar way to the Phantom 107 is sort of the natural successor to the original graphite. This new 03 Phantom 100 is really dialing into where we were with the 03 Tour 100. We borrowed a lot of the same, you know, stiffness zone characteristics, and we've done a lot of play testing, and the technologies have changed, and some of our production methods have had to change because of, you know, advancements. But it's pretty close, and we're really happy with the way it plays. It feels like a Phantom, but also still touches on that 03 Tour 100 that people loved. So we're really excited about that coming out later this year, and hopefully people will be excited and have some of those nostalgic memories of when they were grinding on a clay court with an 03 Tour 100, you know. So yeah, we do that. We're going to look at our past, because our past is important to us, and people love the history of the Prince brand. So we never want to move away from that. But we can do a true callback, or we can do a 2024 version of something that we've done in the past, and hopefully both of those will appeal to people.
Yeah, that EXO line, it was a favorite of mine, and, you know, I had the pro players reach out to me because I had a bunch of them, and like, oh, can I buy these off you? And you know, you feel like, okay, you're ranked 80 in the world. Like, I will sell them to you, because you need them more than I do.
Yeah.
So it's definitely, I think, a lot of happy faces if that comes back. Like, I also played some like ITF seniors, when you see some pretty strong players playing with like the old Exos and even the Phantom you mentioned, the O-Port, I think the first gen one, maybe. But that's a really good, nice frame. So that's nice that you're thinking of relaunching some of that, right?
Yeah, it's coming soon. So yeah, like I said, we're excited about it. We know that sort of frame is something that people remember from Prince. So it's important for us to do that properly. And we didn't release the second generation of it everywhere in the world. I think we just had it in certain pockets. But this time around, we're really confident in the way that racket plays. So we just want to get that out there. We're going to introduce that by itself in its own little time zone and give it the love that it deserves, because I am truly excited about what that racket will mean to players.
Yeah, and I think there's something that you highlight as a brand, like your brand history and heritage. It's quite important to also show, like, okay, we're evolving, we're looking at the next line of rackets, the next evolution, but we have also had like a strong past and a strong history, and you should be proud of that. Like, and that's why I think it's important to showcase these old legends, classics, or bring them back if you can, or make a tweak. Because like it gives people nostalgia, but it also shows like, okay, we know what we're doing. Like, this racket came out in the 80s, 90s, whatever, and we're still producing rackets. We're trying to make them better for the modern game, but this is still a good racket, and it's where we were then, and this is where we're going now. Right? Yeah,
and the number of people that I run into that have a Prince story, they played with it in high school, or they remember it from the 80s. Every time, no matter who I'm talking to, somebody remembers an old Prince racket. So we have to be aware of the successes that Prince has had in the past and tap into them and learn from them. I would just say that we obviously want to continue to have those successes, and so it's our job to strive to make the best product that we can. So whether that's learning from the past or looking at new technologies, both are important. Both are gonna help us get to where we want to get to in terms of rackets that make players have more fun playing tennis. And so we'll continue to do that.
When it comes to your string patterns, like, you were always kind of a proponent, I guess, Prince, of like the 1618. But a 1618 in your head is usually a racket that has quite a lot of launch, and I do appreciate, especially with the Phantoms now, but in general, like, if I see 1618 on a Prince racket, I know that there will be some control here. Like, I feel more confident historically with a 1618 Prince, and you still believe in that, despite like the market saying, oh, you have to have 1619 because that's the golden number, whatever, which is completely silly. So tell me how you think about the string patterns.
Yeah, there's a lot of things the market tell us we should do. And, from cosmetics to string patterns to specs. And, a 16 by 19 on one racket is totally different to a 16 by 19 on another racket. They're not all made the same. Head shapes are different, specs are different, stiffnesses of the frame are different, spacings are different on the string patterns themselves. So there's a lot of ways we can tweak a frame to make a 16 by 18 being a little bit more open. And honestly, it's not crazy to have one less string, but to be one string more open, we can adjust the frame to still have control. We can adjust the spacing, the density in the middle of the frame, whether we have 8 strings on the throat or 6 strings on the throat. There's all sorts of different things that we can do to tweak it to still make sure that the frame plays well. And it's why we've done things like 18 by 18 and 14 by 21. It's not an intention to just be different and just say, well, we're not going to do 16 by 19 on every frame. There's actually benefits in terms of playing to having different string patterns. So if you go to an 18 by 18, it definitely gives you a flatter trajectory. It suits that sort of flatter counter puncher. And so we put that string pattern on that frame. We tested it in 1619. We tested it in 1618. We tested it in 1620. We just felt that the 1818 was the right string pattern for that frame. And, we had about 3 or 4 different string spacings on the 1818 as well until we landed on what we landed on. And it's the same with the 16 by 18. You know, I remember back in the day when we were doing, you know, the Techstream launch, we had a lot of debate about whether we should be 1619 because we hadn't done, you know, as many traditional construction frames for a while. We'd had a few, you know, pro versions of some of our old stuff, but the Techstream was coming out and it was only traditional construction. So it was like, do we go really traditional and do the 100 square inch, 300 grams, 16 by 19 exactly on spec for what is the accepted spec in the market? And we're like, no, we've tested it with 1618 and we feel like this is the right string pattern. So I don't know if, you know, every other brand, when they do 16 by 18, it gets too launchy because they just haven't done that string pattern. I'm sure they've done the research. I'm sure that they've tested lots of different patterns. I just think for us that it's not a big stretch for us to do a 1618 or a 1619. It's just making sure the rest of the frame suits that string pattern.
Yeah, that's a good clarification. It's something I talk about a lot because people think sometimes that a string pattern, if you say there's 16 mains and 19 crosses, it is a fixed points. No, like the drill pattern, like you can drill it however you want, right? Like pretty much like within margin. Yep. So people have this perception that like, okay, every 1619 has the same type of pattern because it's the same amount of strings, but obviously not. So that's a good clarification to have, you know, and an 1820 can play more open and give you quite a lot of spin potential, and it can play super dense, you know, and it depends on the head size and a lot of things. So it's a good point of view. And I was always 1820 guy, but I feel like with the 1618 on the Phantom, for example, I can still play, especially on clay, and get a little bit more lift. So that's where I'm going in between them. I'm starting to decide.
And again, you know, we did the Tour 100P, which is 1820, and as you said, you know, it's a little bit more open. You can still get plenty of access to spin with the Tour 100P. And you know, on a Phantom, the 1820, as you said, you know, you enjoy playing with 1820 for your swing style, for your game. But I think it's important that we have that 1618 where you can get more aggressive, you can hit more spin, particularly if you're playing on clay, and that angle of attack is going to be different because you're playing a slightly different type of tennis. So again, it's important for us to make sure that we have those options there, and we're not just going, well, we need to make the commercially acceptable frame, because that's, again, if we do that, we're losing the DNA of prints. And I would just encourage people to go out there and try the product before just saying, well, I wish it was a 16 by 19, because we do get that. Of course, you know, we hear those comments from people. I would have liked the racket if it had been 1619. I'm like, well, did you really test the racket? And do you know what it would have played like if it was 1619? Because I do, because I tested it as a 1619 and there's a 1618 and there's a 1617. You know, we do that in development. So to say that, you know, oh, well, it should have been a 1619 or it should have been this weight, or I wish it had been this swing weight. Sometimes those numbers aren't as important as you think they are. Even stiffnesses. You know, we can have a racket that's 65 RA and another racket that's 65 RA on the same frame, but depending on, you know, how we change the stiffnesses in the zone, or the torsion of the frame, or the twitch stiffness of the frame, you know, the way the hoop sort of breathes as you hit the ball, we can make the two rackets that are the same RA play totally different. So sometimes just when you're looking at the commercially acceptable specs that are written out on websites or written on the side of the frame, go and test it first before you have judgments on it, because we can do a lot of things, and every brand can do a lot of things with their frames to make them different.
Yeah, I think that sometimes the spec sheet gives people some ideas that everything is fixed, right? So you see RA, a 65 RA, then it's going to be semi-stiff. It all depends, right? You can have a 62 RA frame that's super stiff and pretty like arm friendly, and you can have a 69 RA frame that feels plush and nice, you know? So it's complicated, right?
Yeah, you know those specs are out there to give people an idea. You know, we all list them so that people, you know, consumers can try to understand which racket they should test or they should play with, because there are a lot of options out there. You know, there's so many brands, and every brand does a huge number of different rackets and franchises, that you need to have those marketed specs that people can understand. But it's really a guideline. It's not like, well, I'm a 300 gram, 65 RA player, so that's all I should try, because every brand is going to have a 300 gram 65 RA racket that plays different. So again, we obviously we have to understand the commercial realities, and there's always going to be frames that we do too that cater to people that are just looking for those specs. But if we don't do different things, we'll never learn. Well, maybe in 2030 the accepted spec is a 98 square inch with a 18 by 19 string pattern. We don't know where the game's going. Technology changes make product change. The introduction of polyester string in the 90s completely changed everything. And, so what's next? What's coming? Well, what's commercially acceptable now might be totally different, but we're going to keep trying and doing those different things.
Yeah, and I appreciate you for that. One thing also in doing things differently, right? Like, so that now the industry has power rackets that tend to be blue, Pure Drive, Instincts, Ultras from Wilson. Dunlops also do the same color coding. Red, black is Control, and then you have Spin is yellowish for the mainstream brands, I would say. And in your case, you're not doing that. You're more offering like, okay, there's Control here, there's more power and spin in one, like the Rip cord. So what's your take on that? What's your thinking around like this kind of that it's all very similar from all the different manufacturers?
Yeah, and I sort of understand it again, because then the consumer gravitates to those rackets, sort of understanding what they're going to get when they pick it up. And again, we've been there in the past. We had rackets where we had our blocking style, and we were updating from one generation to the next, and the blocking was staying the same and the colors were staying the same. So people could understand. I think, again, maybe it's because we're not as big as some of those other brands right now. It gives us a little bit more freedom to try some different things cosmetically, and even change from one generation to the next. If I'm buying a pair of sneakers, but buying a pair of basketball shoes, I don't buy the same colors every time because I know that it's going to fit me right. It's kind of a weird thing. And it's the same with clothes. It's the same with cars. If I have a black car, it doesn't mean I have to only buy a black car next year because it's going to drive the same. So if every other industry can change aesthetics and have their look and feel, why can't we? So I think that's sort of the stance we're taking. Yes, certain franchises are going to have an overarching feeling. So like I said, the Legacy is going to feel more premium. It's going to feel luxurious, and the Phantom's always going to tend to be darker, and maybe the Rip is going to be aggressive in terms of the way we do the cosmetics. But I think, if I talk to our design team, it's also interesting for them to look at new color trends and new design techniques, and play with different types of graphics on the cosmetics to maybe you sell more rackets to a consumer that wasn't looking at that last time because the cosmetic didn't appeal to them. If we only do the same color every time, it's maybe we're just speaking to the same consumers every single time.
Do you feel like the racket landscape has changed a bit in terms of getting exposure to your rackets now that there's so much social media? You can use influencers. There's some review sites such as Tennis Nerd, obviously, but other ones as well. And it's a different marketplace than it was maybe 10 years ago. Do you feel like that's a chance for you to reach out, maybe even though having bigger or smaller marketing budgets, but you can actually have a different strategy and be seen more?
Yeah, I think it is. I think, we're obviously aware that we need to do a better job there too. I mean, we have social media the same as everybody else. Maybe our social media following is a lot smaller. So, we're maybe not speaking to as many consumers as we want to. There's a lot of things that, we learn from having, other brands around us that are in the fashion world, and things that we can do things differently. We can approach it in a different way. but we can always do it. We can always do a better job there and tell better stories. And I think that's something moving forward that we want to do. We want to be able to speak to our consumers and really let them understand, what the products are and who they're for and what their feeling is behind those frames, because you got to have an emotional connection to the product as well as just understanding the product. And if we just continue to make, what we believe are good rackets and we don't promote them to the consumers and get them excited about it, then we're never gonna see a ton of Prince rackets at every tennis club, which is obviously something we want. We want Prince rackets in as many players' hands as we can, because we believe that they're going to enjoy using them. So we need to use our social media platforms and different marketing techniques in maybe a way that other brands aren't, just like we're going to do rackets and cosmetics in a way that other people can't. So it's something that we're exploring, and I think it's really important. That landscape, as you said, has definitely changed. We can speak to consumers that aren't just getting direction from their tennis coach, or aren't just seeing it on the few major websites. There's so many more people out there talking about rackets. There's so many more people out there reviewing things, influencers, people like yourself that are extremely knowledgeable about the product and are testing everything, that maybe weren't there 10 years ago, where you could only find out in a magazine or one or two sites. So we need to do a better job. I need to be on your podcast more often and speak to you more frequently. And I think there's definitely ways to speak to more people. So
yeah, and you're welcome anytime. It's always great talking to you, Tim. You're a super knowledgeable guy. I really respect your work and your professionalism with rackets. Like I love the new Phantoms. As I said, I'm now considering which one I should pack for my trip, but probably 1820 might be the bet, one each, which is also something you can think about. Like if you need more spin, you go 16-18. If you want a bit more directional control, you go 18-20. So there's the option there.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks a lot, man. I know you're a busy guy, and I wish you all the best. And anytime you want to jump on, talk about new upcoming models, I'm very excited about EXO lines and all the new stuff that you're bringing out. So just let me know, and we'll talk.
Yep, absolutely. It's been great speaking to you, and I'm sure we'll be back on, because we definitely have some more things in the pipeline. So yeah, excited to talk about those another time, and we'll chat again.
Thanks, man.
All right, thanks, Jonas.